Welcome to this video, which will aim to give you a better understanding of the role of a user as you complete tasks. In order to understand the relationship between the query and the user, it is important to also understand the user individually. Why might they be searching for this query? What other queries could they search for afterward? What other keywords and queries might interest them, whether or not they have actively searched for them? All of these questions should be considered as you attempt to understand the user and their motivations. Once you have reached a thorough understanding of the query, you can apply this to the user themselves. Is the query for a niche product or a B2B service? The price should also be considered. Someone seeking an expensive and specialized piece of hardware would probably have different motivations and interests than someone looking for DIY instructions. A query for a free service or website probably has different user goals behind it than one that is expensive. This doesn't need to be overthought. Rather, try to imagine how an actual person would interact with the internet as they go about using a search engine. Another important thing to consider are passive versus active interests. Anytime a user performs a search, you can interpret their query as an active interest. Passive interest can then be inferred from the active one. For example, a user entering the query lasertag Dallas has an active interest in laser tag, with potential passive interest in go-karts, paintball, or Dallas-based entertainment. This can help to not only understand how best to market to this user, but also what they might want to click on without having actively searched for. These interests do not always need to be well informed or clear. They can also be impulsive and in the moment. Imagine that you have a friend who always seeks your advice for recommendations, and they have asked for your opinion on doing volunteer work in Costa Rica. While they clearly want your opinion on the subject they brought up, they probably wouldn't consider it off topic if you mentioned volunteer work in Peru or rainforest conservation after discussing Costa Rica. They might even find those ideas more interesting. They probably would be less interested in hearing about teaching English in Indonesia, and even less interested in hearing about Costa Rican property for sale. They would be very confused if you started talking about a great buzzsaw they could really use, or a new Mexican restaurant in town. In much the same way, you can imagine how pleased or displeased a user could be to encounter a certain page or ad on a website. There are more tools to ascertain this than just the user's query, so don't worry if the query is not provided. You may also be asked to identify user interest based on the web page that they are currently on. A user visiting a page for birdwatching in Fort Myers would probably be pleased to see binoculars advertised on the sidebar, but confused and maybe even unhappy to see ads for bird cages. A user will not give the internet the same benefit of the doubt as they would a real person they had sought advice from, so someone searching for one thing but seeing results and ads for another, unrelated thing, would quickly become frustrated. Since you can only visit another page instead of saying, "That's not what I meant," it is important to consider what the user might find a good or useful result versus one that could be considered bad or useless. How attractive would the following examples be for someone visiting a page about French Impressionist painters? An ad for prints of Renoir pieces. A web page for an art history course. An ad for art supplies. A web page for language learning software. An ad for a course on making a good first impression in the office. Some of these examples are far likelier to overlap with this user's interests than others. Imagine the following scenarios. A user is playing a mobile puzzle game and is shown an ad for another game and an ad for an accountant's firm. The ad for the other game may be of interest to this user since they are already playing one type of game. The ad for the accountants might irritate them since they are playing games to escape reality and don't want to be reminded of things like taxes. A user is watching a video where someone is discussing how they delivered aid during a recent natural disaster. Suddenly, in the middle of an intense and emotional speech, the video is interrupted by a rather goofy ad. How likely is the user to not feel at all irritated or annoyed by this? A user is on a website about collecting and examining statistics needed for a thesis paper in an advanced degree. How likely are they to click on an ad for the lottery? Remember, you don't need to overthink this. You are an internet user too, so try to imagine yourself in these scenarios. If you were reading a review for a newly opened play in your area, would you be happier to see an ad for theatre tickets to a different production or an ad for plane tickets to the city you already live in? Once you have a clear understanding of the user, you will be able to make this type of judgment with confidence when rating. We hope that you have found this video on the role of a user helpful in understanding the relationship between what a user definitely wants and what they may or may not want. As you perform tasks, you can always leave a comment in the comment box to clarify your reasoning. You can also contact your support team with any questions or concerns you might have that are not addressed in the instructions.